Hi everybody, it's me Kaylin here. As you can imagine, it's been a difficult week here at Divided by a Wall. The last episode of the 100, episode 307, entitled 13, really dealt a blow to me and Marissa, but in great part to me, and that's why I'm doing this video. We both agreed that it'd be better if I explained my side of things, and I figured that could best be done by just basically having an open video letter to anyone. I don't wish to rehash any of the grievances that people have been nonstop talking about the past week, but I just want to explain my personal view of the matter and also explain how our YouTube channel, our Divided by a Wall channel, is going to move forward from here on out due to what has happened last week with what used to be my favorite show. So that being said, one quick shout out to Megan, who is a Tumblr user who created this amazing video that said everything and more about our grievances about the episode, but she also mourned for those who were hurting, and she just made a lot of good points, and I can't even tell you how many times I ended up tearing up during that. It was really great. Her Tumblr username, if I'm remembering correctly, is Sexy Ugly. 2 Y's on both the sexy and the ugly. Look her up. She's fantastic. She made a great video. That being said, without further ado, my thoughts on last week's episode of the 100. Basically, it was just so very wrong as far as timing goes, as far as where the shot was, as far as the fact that she was shot by her own mentor, as far as the fact that Clark, a healer, just kind of stood there for so long, doing virtually nothing. It's almost laughable, and that's why I'm smiling right now, because it's kind of ridiculous how long she just stood there. And you could tell how long it was that she stood there because they started in daylight when she was shot, and then by the end of it, when she died, it was nighttime. Wow, I just realized what a kind of beautiful parallel that is to Lexa's dying and her light going out, and also just the light going out of Clark's world. And good directing. I will admit that episode had good directing. But that aside, the fact that Clark stood there for so long doing nothing, she just held pressure on the wound, didn't bother to go get a healer, some supplies, extract the bullet if it didn't go straight through. I don't understand how I'm supposed to believe that that was a plausible death. Not to mention the fact that it wasn't a fatal wound, and I imagine that is why it took so long to actually kill her. Which, speaking of, you literally just dragged it out, and yes, that's what drama is meant to do, so kudos for doing that. Kudos for really impacting us and hitting us hard. But I don't give you kudos for any of the rest of it. I give Alicia and Eliza the biggest kudos in the world for that acting in the scene, because wow, it was unreal. They made me believe every single bit of it, and they deserve some kind of award for that. They won't get it, but they deserve some kind of award for it because they rocked it. They killed that scene, and they did fabulously for what they were given. Now, that being said, it's just absolutely ridiculous that you expect me to believe that all these other people on the show can get shot and tortured. Just a couple episodes before was left shot for dead, basically, and she sat there for like a day until they came and found her, and she was fine. She's still kicking. I just don't see how I'm supposed to believe that Lexa's death was believable. I would have much preferred if Lexa had some sort of action in her own death, that she chose to do it. She lived this life full of fighting for her people and the things she cared about and her ideologies that she cared about, and yet she died by a stray bullet that was completely shot by accident by her own mentor. That's not a just death for someone as phenomenal as Heda, Lexa, Trigo. It baffles me that anyone would think that is a worthy death for the commander of the 12 clans. Basically, it's the circumstances of the death and the ridiculousness of the death that's what got to me. And that's what made it not okay. Now granted, there's a whole other issue with the timing of the death being right after Lexa finally had happiness. And you had to know that that was going to affect people. You had to know that people were going to take that as, I don't get to keep my happiness. Especially the LGBT community, who I know is a huge part of the audience for this show. They finally see themselves happy on television. They see themselves in these characters. I see myself in these characters. And you show us that the minute we get happiness is the minute we die. I don't see how that can be perceived as okay at all. I don't understand how it didn't cross your mind how deeply this would affect people. It baffles me. What I don't think they considered was how impactful this death was because we were given such hope. They strung along the fans of this character, of this character's relationship, as soon as they realized that this viewership was valuable. And that's totally cool. You lap up all the attention if you've got this great character and you have a whole community that's ready to support your show. But I take issue with the fact that they hyped it up. They gave so much hope. They specifically set up the filming of the finale on the premiere day with Lexa in it to continue giving hope to the viewers who were in the show because of Lexa, because of the Clark and Lexa relationship. And that's what I really take issue with. Because if fans hadn't had so much hope, then it wouldn't have hit quite as hard. Now, granted, why shouldn't we have hope? Why shouldn't we have hope that this relationship is going to work out? Why shouldn't we have hope that a character that we see ourselves in so sincerely is going to make it out of the show alive? Why shouldn't we have hope? Apparently we were silly to try and have hope. We thought this was going to be different. Apparently you weren't. Now this isn't to take away from the fact that there are other LGBT characters on the 100, because there are. And it's great that they're there. Don't get me wrong. But I don't see how you can just be like, oh, it's okay that we killed one of them because, oh, look, we've got these 2 more. No. It was best said in a post I saw today by Tumblr user Lexa's Bay, if I'm remembering correctly. I'm sorry if I'm crediting you wrong. But they gave this wonderful analogy that said, that addressed this, well, we're treating our LGBT characters the same as we'd treat our straight characters. Which in an ideal world, that's a lovely thought. A lovely, lovely thought to have everybody treated the same. But that's not the world we live in, and your show doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's real life out here. And LGBT people are dying. They have high rates of anxiety and depression, and there's no denying that. And you need to consider that when you're putting these characters on your show, because you should know that people are going to identify with them, especially if you're pulling in that specific audience by promoting those characters. But I digress. This analogy It's like saying if you have a plate full of cookies and a plate with one cookie on it, and you're treating them both fairly, so you take a cookie off of both plates. I don't see how that can be construed as fair, because it's not. When you have this many LGBT characters represented in the media, not to mention represented well and accurately without stereotypes, just the fact that they're there, this many there, and the amount of straight people, I can't fit it in the screen. I can't. When you have such a small representation for a group of people, it is ridiculous to say that they can be treated the same, especially when it comes to killing them, to taking them away from those who identify with them. And that leads me into the reason people are so upset that it was Lexa who died, and we take so much issue when people say, well, just watch something else. Change the channel. The thing is, there is no other Lexa out there to identify with. There is no amazingly kick-butt, strong, fierce, wise, loyal, passionate, loving, multifaceted character who just happens to be a lesbian and represents so many people who are struggling with that. You can't change the channel and find her anywhere else. And what makes her different from Clark is that she loved so unabashedly. She was so willing to have all this love within her, and you knew it. She was the one who initiated the potential relationship between her and Clark. You could always tell how much Lexa was feeling, as much as she tried to repress it. I think she cried more than anyone else in the show, which is just baffling, because she was this person who was head over heart against emotions, etc., etc. And she taught me and so many others that it's okay to let those feelings be out there and to show that love and to just love without regret. Because even though she never actually got to tell Clark, which I take issue with, because at least Finn and Clark got to say their I love yous to one another, even though Clark didn't know if she loved him. Lexa and Clark didn't get to say that to one another, though I do think they knew. But Lexa, no matter what she did, you could tell, and Clark could tell, that she loved her. And that just showed me how I can love. And the difference is that Clark isn't like that when it comes to her love and her feelings. And that's not a bad thing. And I'm certain there's more people who identify specifically with Clark who will have this same reaction because of how they're affected through their identification with Clark. But personally, I identify with Lexa as well as many others, since Clark is much more reserved with her feelings and honestly doesn't know often how she's feeling, but she has a different way of approaching her feelings than Lexa ever did, and she was much more in the realm of repressing them, whereas even though Lexa tried to repress them, she never did, and you could tell. Even though she was preached time and time again by everyone around her that love is weakness, she tried to preach it herself. What a hypocrite, because all she did was love. But she taught me that was okay. So when I lost her, I lost that person who taught me how to love without regret. Those lessons will stay with me forever, and I thank the writers for establishing that within her, and the many traits they established within her that I identify with, and the lessons they gave me through her that I will take with me forever. But I can't thank them for how they ended her story, because it was completely unjust. Completely. Now, on to the matter of our YouTube channel and whether we will be continuing to support the 100 or not. We will continue to watch the 100. Marissa is still very much invested in the show, and I support her for that. I support anyone who continues to stick with the show after last week's episode. Just because I, as well as many others, were hurt by it doesn't mean you have to stop watching. I completely respect those of you who aren't going to be watching anymore. I know where you're coming from. I get it. And I know why you aren't supporting the show. And I understand and respect it. But we're going to review it. And I'm very excited to critique this show. We're going to probably do some sort of best and worst sort of thing, and I'll be praising how wonderful my favorites are, and, you know, critiquing the writing and the storylines and the things we take issue with in the show. So, look forward to that. It should be a fun time. I understand, and I would like everyone to take note of the fact that it is confirmed that it was not a unanimous decision in the writer's room. And knowing this industry, knowing how TV shows and the creative process works somewhat, I know that almost never happens where you have a full unanimous writer's room. And thank you to anyone who stood up in that writer's room and said, no, this idea is wrong. And I would really, really like to thank those who have come out after the episode and shown support and love and respect to everyone who was hurting, such as Lane, who has been really phenomenal to a lot of the fans. You know, even the kind words from Lindsay Morgan and Ricky Whittle. Special thanks to Adina Porter for having such an immense respect for the fans. I continuously am baffled by how considerate she is of their feelings and how much I genuinely believe that she understands, because she has said as much and her actions have made me believe as much. So thank you to Adina for just being there for everybody, because I see it and I acknowledge it, and you deserve acknowledgement for it. I have said time and time again that I wish a lot more people in my life had the same sort of respect for everybody as you do. I am absolutely in awe of the media's reaction to this. I cannot believe there are people of the LGBT community who are so strongly defending this show right now. And I really take issue with the fact that people are saying it didn't cross the line of being the dead lesbian trope or the bury your gays trope. All the trope entails is that a gay character, most often a woman, dies, and that's exactly what happened. So there's no line to cross other than she's either alive or she's dead. If she's killed, then you've crossed the line. There's no other parameters to that trope other than the fact that she is now dead. That's what gets to me when people are saying they didn't cross the line for them. There was one clear way to cross the line and they did it. So you can't say they didn't cross a line because they bought into the trope. And not only did they do the trope, they did an exact copy of the trope, which is just mind-blowing. Put the two scenes from Buffy and the 100 back to back and they're nearly identical, but that's neither here nor there. Just the fact that people are saying they didn't play into the trope when all the trope says is that a lesbian dies. And a lesbian died. They played into the trope. Jason has said they were aware of the trope. And obviously, I don't think any writer wants to go into an episode of anything and play into a negative trope. Why would you want that? I would really question your skills as a writer if you went into a writer's room and specifically wanted to work with negative tropes, unless you were playing against them in some sort of ironic way. So I don't think any of the writers were like, oh, let's do this great trope, guys. No, I don't think that. But it doesn't change the fact that they did it. There's virtually no difference in wanting to do something and it being wrong, and doing something without the intention of it being wrong, but you're knowing that it's still wrong. There's no difference, because no matter what, it's wrong. You can't tell me otherwise. And to add insult to injury, there was the fact that there was the love scene right beforehand, and it was the moment of happiness, and that's also, if there's any parameter within the dead lesbian trope, it's that the death comes right after they finally get happiness, or some sort of reconciliation, or some sort of romantic scene. And they also cross that line in the most extreme way by having the death immediately following the love scene. Which still just blows my mind that that's how it played out. Blows my mind that that's where they went with this. In what world is that your best option? In what world? I don't see how that's ever your best option. You had to know what you were getting into. Now, I think it's wonderful that the writers created the character they did with Lexa, but they had to know what they were getting themselves into when they made the decision to make her a lesbian. They had to know the delicate situation they were getting into, especially with it being a guest star, because guest stars, you never know when they're going to get a job elsewhere. You absolutely never know when you're going to lose that actor. So when they decided to make Lexa a lesbian, and they did it knowing she was a guest star, knowing Alicia could very well get a job elsewhere and they would have to write her off someday. You allowed Alicia to have the freedom of finding other jobs while making her character a minority. When you make a character a minority, when you make that decision, you need to understand the situation you are stepping into. You need to understand that the situation is delicate. You need to understand the history of how that minority has been represented on television before. And you need to understand how to treat that situation if you want to be better at all than how that minority has been treated throughout the rest of TV history. And if you didn't do that, then I'm sorry, but you went about this entirely wrong. If you didn't consider everything you were getting into when you decided that that would be her sexuality, then you need to start doing that. Because when you make anyone a minority in a show, or you cast a minority in a show, you need to understand the situation you're getting into. And now that's not to say you need to stay away from casting minorities or making the decisions for character traits to be that of a minority, because they should. Oh boy, they should. We need to change around this freaking white landscape we have all over television and film. But because history with minorities in mainstream media has been so awful, and not to say there hasn't been good for every single minority in some instance in the history of media, but it's so rare and they're called a minority for a reason, that you have to take it delicately. Whether that be a person of color, whether that be a person with a disability, whether that be someone who has a different sexuality, whether that be someone who identifies as a different gender or transgender or non-binary, you have to treat those delicately. And not just those, but there's so many more minority examples out there that I can't think of right now. you have to take it delicately. And if you want to be considered progressive whatsoever, you have to take every precaution and safety in the world, because your show does not exist in a vacuum. People are still repressed out there. Those minorities are still repressed out there. And you need to understand that when you're taking that on in a show. And if you aren't taking every precaution with what you write for that character in your show, that minority character, then you aren't doing your job right. Yes, everyone should be treated equally, but that is not the world we live in. Everyone has not been treated equally, and people are like, oh, well, I don't see how you can look at it and say that, this black man who was killed on a show, why his death is so much more outrageous than this white man, because aren't they supposed to be equal? No, because there has been a repeated history of these people dying and shown in these awful, violent, abusive situations. We need to treat them better. In an ideal world, that would be lovely if everyone could be looked at and treated the same way, and you had just as many characters of every race and sexuality and capability, both with good things happening to them and bad things happening to them. But unfortunately, in the world we live in, that's not the fairest way to go about things. And I don't care if you're trying to create an ideal world in your TV show world, in the world building that you've done, that's wonderful. If you've got that idea and you're trying to create an ideal world, that doesn't change the fact that your show is in our current world. And it's wonderful to try and portray that ideal world to our current world, so we can hopefully look towards a better future and a world where, that does exist. But you also have to take in the implications of how that looks to our world today, and if it is having impacts negatively or positively on our current world. And if you are refusing to acknowledge our current modern day struggles, then you aren't helping to create a better world, because you're just ignoring the current problems. And if you're trying to be progressive and change, you can't ignore the current problems. You have to address them, you have to treat them delicately, and you have to know how to approach them. And approaching a lesbian character with the potential that she would have to one day be written off, you had to go into that situation with so much forethought and so much knowledge of how that kind of character was treated in the past, if you wanted to be a progressive show, and you had to treat them differently. But the 100 didn't. They did exactly what has always been done to those of Lexa's sexuality. And I think that is a large reason why everyone is so defeated, because we just had hope that things would finally be different. Finally. But they weren't. So one day, it'll happen. But apparently today isn't that. If you're feeling pain and you feel like you need someone right now, reach out. Please, please, please reach out. Reach out to me. Reach out to your friends. Reach out to family. Reach out to other fans. Reach out to a total stranger. Whatever you need, if you need to reach out, if you need to talk, or even if you don't feel like you need to talk, but, you just feel like doing it, just feel free to message me on our Divided by a Wall Twitter. Find me on my Twitter and on my Tumblr, anything. Same with Marissa, same with so many other people. We're willing to talk, we're willing to help, we're willing to listen, because we care and you matter, and we want you to know that you matter and that we care about you. So if you want to reach out, please, please, please reach out to us. I will be here for you in an instant. when I needed people, they were right there for me. And I don't know if I would have gotten through it as well as I did if I didn't have those amazing people in my life to help me get through it. And I want so badly to be there for other people. So please, please, please come to me if you need me for anything. You can message us here on YouTube, if I think that's a thing. So please just contact us if you need anyone. Please. Please.